Welcome back to Season 5 of Legally Uncensored. I'm your host, Demetria Graves, a licensed family law attorney based in California. Our podcast is dedicated to providing essential tools and knowledge for navigating the complexities of family law. We engage in uncensored conversations to shed light on challenging subjects, empowering our listeners with insights for healthier future relationships and proactive divorce strategies. Every season, we strive to offer a deeper approach to divorce, recognizing that legal matters are just one aspect of the journey. This season, we are making sure you understand the basics in the complex world of divorce. Our podcast is your guide to a new beginning and new future. So, thanks for tuning in, and make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and follow us on all socials. And also, more information is available to you at www.legallyuncensored.com. Today, we're focusing on a topic close to our hearts, which is our children. And I am so excited that Dr. Karen Molano came to visit me in studio. 2 hours. I am so grateful for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure to be here today. This is actually really fun to get to do this in person, so
awesome.
I'm really grateful.
I agree. I am so excited that I don't have to talk to a computer screen today. So Dr. Molano is a psychologist and leading expert in infant, family, and early childhood development. Correct?
That is correct.
So tell us about yourself. I want to hear from you.
Yes. So I am, as you said, a psychologist, infant, family, and early childhood specialist, and I founded LumiTaught. And the idea behind LumiTaught is to simplify parenting from pregnancy through the first 5 years so that children and their families can really tap into that unlimited potential that they have. And I do that by instilling a lifestyle that really optimizes the body and the brain from the inside and the outside.
I really like that. We need that in this world today. You know, in my space, divorce, most families have children. A lot of families have children, I should say. And I'm always super protective of kids, right? Because they don't, one, ask to be here, and then two, they don't ask to go through this process.
Right.
So what are some of your insights on the impact that divorce has on young children? Older children can kind of speak for themselves, but yes. What impact have you observed on young children?
Absolutely. So during those first 5 years, because the brain is developing at such an incredibly rapid rate, it can really, really change the trajectory of that child's life depending on how that divorce is handled. So it's not so much that, oh, no, we want to avoid it, because obviously life happens, things happen, and we don't ever want to be in a situation where we're unhappy, because that's also going to impact our kids. But it's really how we handle a divorce in those early years, because it is completely different than what you would expect of, say, a child that is 8, 9, 10, and at a developmentally different age.
So what does that look like, right? Because to be honest, I never thought of it this way, right? Because a lot of us think, oh, wow, under 5, they probably won't remember. So what is the impact on couples that are fighting constantly? It's very contentious. What impact have you seen?
I love that you mentioned that oftentimes we think that the kiddos will not remember, or I hear often they're in the room next door or they're sleeping. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that even as infants, even if they're 2 days old and going through a difficult hardship, they are sensory beings, they're energetic beings, and the feelings that they sense actually get imprinted in their little bodies, in their little brains as the brain is starting to form. And so that entire development completely changes the way they can view the world. Oftentimes, what I see the most in little ones is that they blame themselves. Now, a lot of kids often do, but even more so younger, when they're picking up on the fighting, the difficulties, even just that general feelings of sadness and everything that goes around a divorce, they start to internalize that and start to believe, what is it that I did and oftentimes feel unwanted as adults or unworthy, unwelcome in the world. And so it can really make a difference how we're handling those little beings around us, and not to assume that they don't understand or that they can't sense it or they cannot feel it, because they sure can.
So where does that sit in their bodies, right? Because a lot of people hold pain in different parts of their bodies, and they're so little. So where does the pain or the shame or whatever they feel about it, where does it go?
That can sit in different parts of the body depending on the child, depending on the impact of what's going on. But we will see it in terms of behavior. So we have children that very clearly show the difficulties, let's say in tantrums, meltdowns, crying, clinginess. And then you can also get the complete opposite, where they internalize, and you'll often hear people say, oh, they're such good kids, they don't cry, nothing's wrong with them. But that could also be a red flag, because children are supposed to cry. It's a form of speaking, it's a form of engaging a parent or a caregiver when they need something. And so I've seen children very young that are depressed, which a lot of people don't even realize that at that young of an age, you could be diagnosed with depression, with post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety. And so it will depend on that child and what they're experiencing, but they definitely can internalize it both emotionally and hold that in their bodies. And later on in life, as adults, we start to have all these difficulties or pains, ailments, beliefs that can often be traced back to those early years.
Wow. So a lot of times I do recommend for my clients that they speak to their older children about the possibility of divorce and kind of what that looks like for the family. Do you recommend that people speak to their younger children? And we're speaking 5 and under. Do they speak to their children about changes that are coming?
Absolutely. I actually highly, highly recommend it. I actually just recently collaborated on an article just on this topic alone. It's such an important topic. Even if they're babies, whether they're 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to sit with them in an age-appropriate manner,
right?
Of course, because we're not going to talk to them like if they're 15, but to sit with them and have that discussion about what's going on. And most importantly is to let that little one know that it's not their fault, because that's usually the first thing they go to. They start internalizing that they've been bad, that they did something wrong, and now their mommy and daddy are going to not be together anymore. And to ideally, I know this isn't always feasible, but to have both parents as that united front and to sit down and have a heart-centered discussion, which I think we can agree that in a divorce, the one thing parents can come together is when it's their kids. It's like, okay, we want to do anything and everything to help minimize the pain.
Right.
And so to be able, if possible, to come together and have the discussion that says, mommy and daddy just aren't getting along anymore, or we're just in different spaces, but I want you to know that we love you. This has nothing to do with you. This is not your fault. And just to send that message to them. Also to start talking about the changes, because we think big changes like, I'm going to go to this house and the other house. But children also experience a sense of loss in traditions. And let's say maybe every Friday night was family night, and you sit down and watch movies together. And they're going to start to expect that because they like that routine. And so that's going to really shift their world quite a bit.
Right.
So I highly recommend that, even if it's a baby. I know that sounds kind of weird, but when it's a baby, it's the energetic exchange, because they're going to sense a much different discussion than if we just ignore and pretend like nothing's going on. Then they're just going to pick up on all the emotions of the chaos and the difficulty around a divorce.
And a lot of times we don't talk about this, right? And I say in probably every podcast that I do, I handle the business of divorce, the paperwork, if you may. And a lot of families, even when I ask them in a consultation, they haven't worked through the practical side of what this looks like for the adults, and then, as we're discussing, for the children. Like my son, to your Friday nights, he loves Chick-fil-A. It's like Chick-fil-A Friday. So, and that's a big thing for kids. So you have to discuss even down to Chick-fil-A Friday or Monday movie night, or like you said, because otherwise kids not only feel the shame, but they feel forgotten.
Yes.
Like, what about me? Like, what is happening?
Exactly. And a loss, a massive sense of loss, or even what they have to say isn't important, that their feelings aren't important. So even including them and allowing them to ask questions.
Right.
Say a 3-year-old might have questions. And oftentimes as adults, we think, oh, no, we can't say anything. You could still say things in an age-appropriate manner where it allows them to have a voice, to speak, to ask, well, what's going on? And to go along at that age level. And if you don't have the answer, that's okay. Just to say, you know what, we're still figuring that out, and we're going to do it together.
And that's not an opportunity to bash the other parent.
Absolutely not.
Because I've seen, because mom or dad or they or whoever did X, this is why the family has broken down. And I've seen then kids aligned with the parent they feel need the most support. So that's not an opportunity to do that either.
Absolutely not. And I'm so glad that you bring that point up, because we do want to be clear that it's that neutral environment where you're having a discussion and you're letting the child know you still have two parents that love you.
Very much.
It's not a place to try and get the child to side with you, because what that'll do in the long run is you'll have a child that's either hiding or their love for the other parent from you and feeling this resentment and anger, or you're going to have just a resentful, angry child that's confused and feeling torn back and forth. And I know as parents, we want the best for our kids, and sometimes we say and do things and we don't realize the impact we're having and how that does for them. That
in
too.
This space at times. But this is why I like to have these conversations, so they can hear it from someone other than myself about the impact that we're having on our children. So with that said, perfect segue to what I was going to ask you. What have you heard from children about the nastiest things parents do during this process that impact them?
I think, like you said, perfect segue. I actually worked for Child Protective Services for 20 years. So I got to see quite a bit, from the very minimal to the extreme of what can go on in a family when there's discord and separation and divorce. And at that age range, 5 and under, it's just super interesting because they're such pure beings. Their little brains are not developed in the way ours are. And a lot of times, for example, a social worker would go to interview the child, and they would right away say, my mommy told me to say blah, 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 blah. Oh my goodness. And some of the worst things I have seen are parents actually training their children to say that the other parent is doing certain things, like hurting them, hitting them, not feeding them, which imagine what that looks like in the long run for that child. So,
well, in that case, it sounds like parents aren't putting the needs of their children before their own.
Correct.
And we all know divorce is very complicated. So aligning children with you might get you financial gain or whatever gain you're seeking now, but I've seen it backfire. And kids do grow up to become adults, and they learn who you are as a person. And that can definitely backfire at a later time.
It most likely will. And think about the difficulty in the teen years. We hear so much about how tough the teen years can be. Well, if we go back to those first 5 years, whatever goes on there is really going to determine what those teen years look like. The adult years and the relationship you have with your children, or let's say, unfortunately, there are parents out there that aren't as invested in their kids. But now, what about that child's relationships as adults with their partners, with their bosses, their neighbors, their own children? So we're just continuing this generational trauma from one to the next. We have to, at some point, become more aware and stop that cycle, because it will keep going.
What would you say to those parents that are just, they have hooked horns and they are in the fight and they're not really paying attention to the impact it's having on their children?
I think that's when you have to go inward. You really have to just stop for a minute and sit with yourself and ask yourself, what is it that I'm trying to do? What is it that I'm trying to get out of this? But most importantly, what is it that is most meaningful to me? Is it that I really want to have the most peaceful relationship going forward with my ex-husband, ex-wife, with my child? What does it really mean to say win? Because I know you hear that quite a bit when it comes to divorce. I'm going to win this battle.
Yep.
What does that mean? And where is it going to get you 5 years from now, 10 years from now? If you really sit with those thoughts, those feelings, sit with the anger. Because to me, feelings are messengers. They're there because they have a message for you, because there's something within you, a belief system that's holding you back. And it's time to look at it and allow it and let it see where it is that we can heal it, release it, so that we can have a life that we want, because it will impact you, not just in your relationship life. It'll impact your business.
Right.
It'll impact your relationships with your friends. Anywhere you look, whatever's going on in that conflict within the divorce is going to impact your entire life. So to really sit with yourself and ask some of those questions.
What would you say to the parent that is manipulating the children, one, to align with them for their own gain, kind of similar to what we're talking about, but a bit different, and two, encouraging them, well, speaking negatively about the other parent, and then three, drawing the line between children and parent? A lot of questions in one.
That's all right. I think it all comes down to, okay, what is it that you want for your children? Do you want them to have a joyful, peaceful life where they don't have as many adversities as we have as adults? Or do you actually want them to go through the same trajectory? Because I think all of us as adults have a story.
Right.
We all have some sort of trauma. We
Right.
have something. And as a mother, I think often what a lot of us can relate on is that we don't want our kids to go through some of the hardships we experienced.
Right.
We don't want our kids to, say, go through a nasty divorce.
Right.
We want them to be joyful and happy and find someone,
Right.
for the most part, right? And
A
so,
healthy someone.
so when you're doing those things and putting kids in the middle, you're literally preventing them from having that kind of a life, and basically kind of just dragging them into a very similar lifestyle. It's just a repetition of old stories that maybe even your own parents experienced, that I know a lot of us are trying to break. We always do it the best with what we have, but when we can become more aware of what's going on, it's like, oh, I did not even realize I was doing the thing I said I wasn't
Right.
going to do.
Right.
So again, going back inward, and what is it that you want for your child? Because that route of putting them in the middle, bashing the other parent, that's just going to take that child and just, it's going
Right.
to crush them on so many levels, and not just emotionally, because it also impacts a child physically. These are the kids that we see later on with all sorts of medical ailments, with more allergies, asthma, diabetes, cancer. And if you start thinking of older age and they start to have all these illnesses and things going on with our body, because the way we feel and the way we think will break down our body because of the chemicals released.
You know what I've seen that's disturbing? I had a case where the wife married dad when the children were young. Dad had kids from a previous relationship, so they were 2, 3, 4. So new wife basically raised children as her own, get divorced, and dad's like, nope, can't see them anymore. So now they're older. And to me, that's like double trauma, because they didn't have their mom. You know, you kind of found a mom for them, and now you're taking them from the only mom that they knew. Can we talk to those parents that are creating
Yes.
that type of
Absolutely. And I've heard
drama?
this one quite a bit, and I hear it often, not just from clients, but even from people around me that I know. I think too, what makes you the expert in deciding whether that other parent is or is not suitable for your child? Because I often hear, oh, they're not going to thrive under their care, or I can do a better job. But how are we to decide that? And how are we to take that opportunity away from our children to decide on their own if that parent is fit or not for them? Because they will figure it out as they're like, oh, I think I'm going to go hang out with dad a little longer today. Yeah. And that's also part of that life experience. I rather have a child that can understand and learn how to cope with having the experience of having both parents. Let's say things don't go as ideally as planned, versus the child that's just angry and resentful because they never had the opportunity to find out.
Right.
In my experience, when I've worked with older kiddos, like more of like 19, 20-year-olds, and even parents of divorced families, there's a lot of anger and resentment when they don't know the other parent, when they didn't get a chance on their own to figure it out. They were not given the opportunity. And the reality is that, what if it's not so bad? What if that other parent had to learn how to change diapers and take care of a child, and actually did a really good job at it? And this child now has two families that love and support them. So I think we're very quick to judge and assume without really having all the knowing and pieces. We're just doing it from a place of anger and resentment.
Right. And back to the divorce space of wanting to win. And I say this also goes back to picking a attorney that is best for your family, right?
Yes.
So you want someone that's going to say, well, wait a minute, this person has been around for 10, 15, 20, however many years. And if we're thinking about our children and what's best for them, we can't just cut this person out. That's not fair. It's not right. And it's probably not healthy at the end of the day.
It isn't. And going back to picking an attorney, not just a good attorney, but an attorney that resonates with you, is that you're making decisions when you're at your worst.
Yes.
And that's really hard. And to have somebody that can really guide you and that understands and that has the best interest of your family at heart, not just, we're going to win, or especially when there's children. In the long run, and maybe in the short run, great. You got the outcome that you want. But in the long run, a lot of damage goes on, a lot of emotional damage, physical damage, especially to our littles. And when they're 5 and under, because we don't think about it so much, like, oh, they're little, they're fine. They have very, very different needs at 0, 1, 2, 3. And now we're looking at things that we weren't thinking about, which can really lead to a lot of family conflict. For example, I see often when a child's getting potty trained, like one parent is doing it and the other one isn't, or the clothing even. There's fights even over clothing, like, oh no, these are the good clothes and we're going to keep them here, and we're going to dress the child in the shaggier clothes and send those over. And we don't realize that even these things, they can affect our kiddos. And so there are other factors when kids are little and don't quite have the ability to voice themselves that can really impact the trajectory of that child's life, and even the conflict between the parents, because I see a lot of conflict when the kids are little because there's so many more things that we have to pay attention to that we don't when they're older and they're better able to take care of themselves and
tell us what they need. I was very perturbed. I was in court. I won't say which court. I'll just say I was in court. And the judge made a very interesting ruling, and I wanted to ask you about it. I was like, oh, I could talk to her. It was a young couple. Mom was maybe 16, dad was 17, but they both have very supportive families. Mom was breastfeeding. Baby was maybe 3-4 months. But dad said, I don't want to be supervised with just mom. I want to be able to take baby to my family. Parents were educators, seemed very supportive. And the judge made a comment of, well, baby needs mom more right now. And I think babies need both parents, and I think the studies now show
absolutely
they need both parents. They need to bond with both parents. And I was very much so flabbergasted that a judge made orders basically because mom was breastfeeding, and her biased opinion of, because to me that's a bias to think that babies only need mom. I think babies need both parents. There might be times where mom a little more because of the breastfeeding, but eventually there is no breastfeeding, or moms are pumping, or whatever your family dynamic is. But I was heartbroken for that young man because I can tell he really wanted the bonding experience under the year stage. And I wanted to kind of get your opinion on that. Is that accurate that mom is the primary until one?
I don't agree with that statement, given the research, given what we know about children, given what we know about brain development, that both parents are actually very important in different ways for different reasons. And I definitely think it's a misconception and a societal story that we've been telling for so many years that, okay, it's mom. And it's funny because it starts a weird loop where mom, actually, we are gatekeepers by nature. Whether it's even in a marriage where things are going well, we naturally will protect and be like, oh, no, you're doing that wrong. You got to put on the diaper differently. And so then what happens is that dad's like, oh, well, I'm not good enough. I guess I don't know what I'm doing. And they retract. And so then mom gets upset because dad's not helping enough. But see, we started the circle, the loop in the first place. So these are some of those unconscious stories that goes on when in reality, if we could really bring that family unit in, it would be not just supportive for that child, but for the family as a whole, even in a divorce. So I would not agree when it comes to, say, breastfeeding. I think it's more about, okay, let's look at a schedule that makes more sense so that mom is seeing the child more often. So if it's a baby, I wouldn't necessarily recommend 1 week on, 1 week off. It'd be like something a lot more frequency where they could see each other. But there's ways around all of it, especially with all the technology we have. Okay, so maybe that child has to drink out of a bottle, but it's still breast milk. So there's ways around it. I would never want to take that away from either parent.
To be honest, the young man was not asking for week on, week off. He was asking for just three days or so a week. During the day, he didn't even ask for overnights. Oh, wow. So I want everyone to be educated. More importantly, our judges need to be educated when they're making those type of important decisions about children and where they go, and this notion that dads are less important or moms are more important or moms are less important.
No.
Kids need both of their parents, especially if they're both healthy and able to show up the way that our children need us to show up. With that said, because that really rocked me to my core, so I was happy I was going to talk to you.
Oh my goodness.
I text one of my friends.
Really hard.
Like, oh my God, this is happening in court. So that goes to show you our children are often the forgotten factors and pieces in the divorce process, which is concerning.
And it's not just judges, because I think about most professions. For example, in my world of mental health, I've led a team of clinicians, and one of the things I always emphasized, why do you always pick up the phone and call mom to set up that appointment? Have you ever thought of calling both of them or have them both on the call? What's going on here? And if you look in general, pediatricians, teachers, where do we go? Mom. So I think it would be great if all of us started to change that a little bit, because I think a big part of it is because this is the way we're meant to think. We naturally, unconsciously think, oh, mom. And we go there.
I will say schools are going to, both parents are on the email chains and the text lists and all of that. So they tend to be a little more inclusive, but I still think we have a lot of work to do. With that said, we're talking a lot about the impact, but I think it's important for parents and professionals alike to know kids are also very resilient. they are able to sometimes process things a little better than us adults. And they are way more intuitive than we are because I don't think they've been brainwashed yet to ignore their intuition. So, how can parents foster that, their resilience, keep their strong intuition while they're going through this process?
I love that you bring up the word intuition. It's literally one of my favorite words ever. And how intuitive kids are. We do not give them credit. I mean, if you think about it, they come into the world and they learn to crawl and walk and talk all in this short amount of time. That's them tapping into their intuition and their ability to know, like, I've got this. And then we jump in and we start to tell them, be careful, don't do this, don't do that. And I'm like, wait, I thought I had it, but that one over there is saying I don't. And then they start to question themselves. And then they start to build these beliefs at a very young age that they're not good enough, that they're not worthy. And sometimes we say things and we don't even intend to do that, but we are. And so then they no longer start to trust in their own intuition because they're listening to what parents and caregivers and other people around them are saying. Actually, under the age of 5 up until about the age of 7, kids are literally in a state of hypnosis. And so the different brain waves that we have, little ones are typically in alpha waves and theta waves, and that's where our subconscious gets programmed. So everything they hear is literally getting programmed into their little brains. That's also why they believe in Santa and the Tooth Fairy and all of these different characters, or all the pretend play, because they're in a state of hypnosis, and it's like this dream world. That's why also why they're so creative and able to do things that us as adults are like, I don't even know how they do it. Like, how do you have all this energy? And give me some of that, because they're tapping into an energy that we have forgotten how to tap into. Right. And so when we jump in as parents and we don't let them do a little bit of the leading, then we start to take away that power that they have. And that intuition that they can tap into, because we believe that we're supposed to tell them how to do, and they actually have a lot of internal knowledge that guides them. And so it's more of a dance versus I'm the parent, let me teach. It's more like, okay, let's see where you're at, and let's go back and forth. Let me allow you to try. Let you be. And of course, in a divorce, there's a whole other layers of the blocking them from tapping into that intuition.
I will say it is a hard dance.
It is.
Because my son and I went hiking with a group, and I don't like jumping over rivers and doing that. So I automatically assumed, oh, he's going to need my help. He's not going to like it either. It was the absolute opposite. He's jumping in, getting wet, and I'm like, let me hold your hand. And he's like, Mom, I got this. And it's like, wow, if I'm not careful, I'm putting my fears on him.
Correct.
He wants to jump in the river and get hit by rocks and things I don't want to do. But it was definitely an experience for me, like, wow, this is his space, and I had to get out of it. And it doesn't always feel good as a parent when they don't need you in the way that we want them to. But it was very important for me to kind of step back and let him do his thing.
I love your awareness, your level of awareness, because it does take so much awareness. I've been on that boat so many times, where roller coasters, or one time we went up to in Virginia, they have some tree park. You're literally climbing up trees, and you're like 30 feet off the ground. And he was 6 and he's climbing, and I'm like, ah! And so you're scared that something's going to happen. And I could see he was very confident. It was not instilling my fears. But I think that's part of the process, is awareness, and being aware of, okay, this feeling that I'm feeling, is this mine, or is that child really in danger? Because 80% of our thoughts are automatic, and 97% of them are negative. What?
So, that's a lot.
That's a lot. And so to really sit and ask yourself that question, and the hopes are that the next generation is going to have it a little bit easier with their children, and
Right.
so on and so forth, if we do start having that awareness of, okay, this feeling, this thing I'm feeling, is it mine? Or does this child really need me to jump in? Or am I instilling that fear or that anxiety in an unnecessary manner?
I mean, and it's hard work. It's not easy because it's like,
it's an
oh,
everyday.
wow, right. My
Mm-hmm.
child may no longer need me anymore. And if we're bringing it back to the divorce space, oh, wow, my child may want to spend more time with this parent during certain, stages in their life. And for their development, it is important to accept it. You might not like it. It might not feel good. You might have to go and talk to Dr. Molano or the equivalent because it doesn't feel good, but it is so important for their development.
Right. And I am going to say, I feel like our children will always need us. It just looks different.
Right.
It's not necessarily what we might think. Like, oh, mine's starting to move on to wanting to talk to his friends. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I want my hugs. So, but again, that's mine.
Right.
We have so many beliefs within us because sometimes it triggers something within us that happened when we were kids. And those traumas and those hurts and those pains, and to, again, sit with them and go inward. Okay, what's this telling me? I have this feeling, this sense of loss, this fear. What's this about? And if you allow that, you actually give yourself an opportunity to heal from that. And you're going to have a different relationship with your little.
Right.
But like you said, it's like going to the gym. You stop going to the gym and you're going to lose your muscle.
Right.
You have to keep going every day or however many days you go. When it comes to your beliefs, it's an everyday of paying attention to the dialogue in your head. Now, an easier way is to pay attention to the way you feel, because we get so many thoughts in a matter of one moment. I'm going to make dinner. I'm going to do this. So, but when you pay attention to the way you're feeling and you start to feel just a little bit off, ooh, something's going on there. There's a thought that's leading to the way I feel, and then chemicals are released in your body that are either going to keep you in balance, in alignment, or going to throw you off.
Right.
And so when you really can start tapping into your feeling, why am I feeling this? And really allowing the message to come through, you'd be surprised when you actually talk to the feeling. Imagine like it's a person sitting in front of you. Okay, fear, you're here. Let's have a discussion and allow it in with the intent to hear its message and heal it. It's very different than sitting in it and wallowing it and feeling like a victim to it.
Right. So this is our long way of saying to get to know your stuff and don't make it your children's stuff.
Yes.
Because then now we're just creating more trauma, more therapy appointments.
Perpetuating the cycle, the hamster wheel.
Right. With that said, because some people don't have the awareness, right? Sometimes it does take some help from professionals such as yourself. So what do you recommend for parents that have a hard time doing that and especially have young children? Are there therapists that will work with young children, because sometimes they don't have the vocabulary to kind of do the therapy process, but is there anything that you recommend?
Absolutely. There are therapists that work with young children. There are coaches that work with young children. For example, I work with that age group because it's such a unique age group. It's not as common to see people that specialize in that age range, but it's becoming more and more common. Thankfully, more people are getting trained in it and understanding it. But even when it comes to getting divorced, to really spend a little bit more time there with that parenting piece and then think about, okay, how can we bring someone in that's neutral, because forget it, our feelings can definitely get the best of us, and help us through this process, and to sit and seek for help, whether it's for yourself, for your little one, for the family. There are so many alternatives nowadays. It doesn't even have to be a therapist. It could be someone in a community, people that, someone in your religious community, or somebody that can really be more of a neutral party, that can support you. I feel like today there's so much more.
It is.
You can look online and there's different coaches for pretty much anything. It's just more about finding someone that makes sense to you, that feels good to you, and that actually has the level of knowledge and understanding that you need. Because at the same time, with so many resources out there, I feel like sometimes we don't get the best of them. We just hire someone with very little experience or little knowledge and understanding. So to really just do your research and find somebody that makes sense to you.
So what are your, I guess, last couple of tips for a parent that's in this situation? They're coming upon a divorce. They have young children. What would you say?
Yes, I would say don't rush through the process. I feel like people just rush through it because they just want to get to the end and want this to be over because it feels crappy. I understand that part. But if you could slow down and work with someone, for example, like you, that has the knowledge, the experience, that actually cares about that family unit, and to really slow down and think about, okay, is this plan that I have here, is this going to best benefit my child in the long run? I mean, think 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, 20 years, as opposed to just kind of filling in the boxes, because that's where I've noticed has been the biggest issues is when we just rush through things and we don't stop to think of all the little details. It's better to take the time up front and have a discussion with a neutral party about some of those developmental stages than it is 2 years down the road or 4 years when the divorce is done and now you got to go back, and either you're going to have to go back to court or bring someone else in. Do it in the beginning.
Right.
Become educated in the beginning about it.
This was so amazing. Thank you so much. How can people find you?
Yes, thank you. My company is Lumitot, Lumitot. Pretty much all socials, website, and I have all sorts of gifts that I think can be helpful. I think for this audience, one that would be super helpful, I have one that's 44 phrases we inadvertently say to our kids that lower self-esteem and self-worth. So I think that one tends to come up a lot when we're going through a divorce. And so that one, if you go to my website, you can find it there.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge, and I had a great time.
Thank you. It's so much gratitude. This has been so much fun and super informative, also from my end, to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for all of you listening, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Molano. Like she said, you can find her on all social media platforms. I am going to get those things I need to say nicely to my child. Thank you so much for listening to Legally Uncensored.